Hello, I'm Dr. Kathleen Brewer Smyth, Associate Professor from the University of Delaware, and I'm here to talk to you today about what is forgiveness and how might it mitigate the lifelong negative health consequences of abuse and trauma. Now, this is a huge body of knowledge, so we'll be focusing basically on the neurobiology of forgiveness because it impacts the entire body, but we'll just be focusing on the brain because we have a limited amount of time here. What is forgiveness? It's been defined as replacing anger toward an offending person with more positive, pro-social feelings and thoughts such as compassion, letting go of anger and other negative emotions that can continue to allow the offense to keep hurting the victim. It's a conscious decision to let go of negative feelings, whether the person deserves it or not, whether they've asked for it or not. It's by choosing to offer compassion and empathy to the person who wronged you. So, what is empathy and compassion? Trying to see things from the other person's perspective. Hurt people hurt others. So, why were they so hurt that they had to hurt you this way? And that's how we can come to the point of having empathy and compassion for perpetrators. Now, I know it's difficult. We'll be talking about how difficult it is, and we'll be talking about how we can overcome some of the difficulties in forgiveness and why it's so important. But it allows one to move forward with life rather than getting stuck in this situation that continues to cause pain for the person who's been the victim. Forgiveness does not mean that we should forget or keep going back to continually put ourselves in harm's way. It does not undo or erase what happened. It just allows one to accept it and let go of negative emotions that perpetuate the pain. So the whole idea is to stop the pain, and we need to let go of those painful feelings that continue to make things worse. Forgiveness involves carrying negative thoughts and emotions of bitterness, anger, resentment. All those things do not harm the perpetrator or improve the situation. It usually just continues to cause more harm for the one holding the negative emotions. Holding on to strong negative emotions such as anger or revenge aimed at another person or situation has been described to be like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt someone else. That does not help us to continue to hold on to negative feelings. It does not, the other person may not even know how hurt we are. And holding on to anger, they may not know how angry we are about this. And it certainly doesn't hurt them. And some people just don't care how angry other people are at them. Forgiveness promoting treatments reduce psychological symptoms. It reduced desire for revenge, reduced rumination about the offense. Rumination just means you're going over and over and over it in your mind until it just feels like you're continually wallowing in this horrible pain that continues to feel worse and worse. But then it's in letting go of that, reducing the rumination, is what happened with these interventions. And they were able to achieve forgiveness, and these forgiveness promoting treatments may be more effective than other types of interventions on the various different psychological symptoms that were being evaluated. Sexually abused nuns reported post-traumatic spiritual growth resulting from their forgiveness process. So we can actually grow through the difficulty and trying to sort out what good can come out of it, and how we can move forward. There's a lot of different ways of looking at difficult things, and we'll talk about some of that. I use the Heartland forgiveness scale in my research, and it's an 18-item self-report questionnaire. And it talks about dispositional forgiveness of one's general tendency to be forgiven. There's 3 subscales: a general tendency for forgiveness of self, forgiveness of other people, forgiveness of situations beyond anyone's control, such as a natural disaster, and that was developed by Thompson and others. An example from my research. Risk factors for women being under the influence of alcohol compared to other illicit substances at the time of committing violent crimes is a publication that I have. And basically, having been sexually abused as a child made them more likely to be under the influence of alcohol at the time of committing a violent crime. Now, the alcohol and substances are often used by hurt people to cover up the pain. And under the influence of alcohol, we're at greater risk for doing things that we wouldn't normally do, especially violent behaviors. Violent behaviors are very much associated with being under the influence of alcohol. So women who are sexually abused were more likely to be under the influence of alcohol compared to other illicit substances at the time of committing violent crimes, including homicide. And some of them said this would have never happened if we hadn't been under the influence of alcohol. I would never have killed this person. It's a very sad situation, but a lot of times this unforgiveness is held from, a lot of times women who have been sexually abused as young children tend to blame themselves. So there's this lack of forgiveness of themselves and lack of forgiveness of others, that they self-medicate with alcohol and things like that. And when sexually abused women are under the influence of alcohol, it made them at greater risk of committing a violent crime and being incarcerated. So here's some things you can see here. This talks about family sexual abuse, non-family sexual abuse, and childhood physical abuse. And all those things result in lack of regard for self and others. And one of the things we see is suicide attempts. So this is the fight or flight stress response that I do my research with. And you can see the blue area, the hypothalamus, and the little stalk hanging down below it is the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus sends a message to the pituitary gland that goes down to the renal, adrenal glands on the kidneys, and it sends a message to make cortisol, the stress hormone. And that's what I study. And that can be triggered with stress, and it's part of the fight or flight, and it goes up when we're under stress. But when somebody's been under stress for long periods of time, such as childhood sexual abuse that just doesn't stop, this becomes abnormal. And you can see here how it becomes abnormal. The triangles at the top are the morning cortisol levels. The circles at the bottom are the afternoon cortisol levels. You can see across the bottom, they're all pretty stable. They're not very different across the board. But on the far left, the non-criminals should have a nice high morning cortisol and a low evening cortisol. See that big variation on the far left for non-criminals? Then you move over to nonviolent criminals, and you lose some of that variation. Then nonviolent or violent with no alcohol and no homicide, and then alcohol-related violence but no homicide, and then homicide, no alcohol, and look at all the way down here, alcohol-related homicide. Look how that variation between morning and evening is practically nothing. This is baseline. This is not under stress. This is just baseline morning and afternoon. What happens is the body downregulates. Cortisol is made to help us do the fight or flight for a short period of time. We either fight the tiger or run from the tiger, but then it's over. the stress system does not like being stressed continually. It'll eventually downregulate until you have what you have here on the right. Now, what's related to that is abuse is so much worse on the far right in that alcohol-related homicide. So years of childhood abuse is tremendous in this population, and especially in those with the significant decrease in this variation between morning and afternoon cortisol. So you can see here childhood abuse, childhood sexual abuse is in the blue, and you can see how that goes straight up. Physical abuse is in the green, that doesn't change much, but the total abuse you can see is much worse in those who committed homicide, and it's driven by the childhood sexual abuse part of that score. So that prolonged sexual abuse, long periods of time during childhood, contribute to that cortisol being out of whack, that then is related to them committing homicide. So people don't just commit homicide. There's usually a lot of buildup problems, and childhood abuse is something that a lot of people carry, and we're going to talk about that as a reason for forgiveness. So my research has been looking at how do we fix that cortisol level, and if we fix that cortisol level, can the violent behavior get better? And you can see here number of hospitalization for abuse-related injuries. Look how high that is in the green in the those who committed homicide. And sexual abuse by a family member is particularly high in the red for those who committed violent crimes and homicide. So why is forgiveness important? Well, a lot of times people have all these things built up from childhood, and it might be something recent, but it might be something built up over long periods of time, like I see in really high-risk females in my research. But many, many, many studies have shown that forgiveness results in improved health. These are just a few. Improved sleep is one of the reasons that it can help the body's ability to heal and become healthier. So both improved sleep and health were related to forgiveness in many studies. Sleep disorders are prevalent in adult victims of adverse childhood experiences. And it could be an important contributor to poor health for female victims of abuse. That is a real problem for adult victims of adverse childhood experiences. So if we can work with forgiveness and help them to sleep better, that's been related to their health. It's related to both the sleep and the health, but that's one important way that it helps health. Increased forgiveness was associated with decreased stress, which were both also related to decreased mental health symptoms. Interactive effects of cumulative stress severity and forgiveness on health was also part of that study. They showed these interactive effects, suggesting that the interventions to develop more forgiveness coping style may help minimize stress-related mental health disorders. Survivors of adverse childhood experiences are at risk for cognitive difficulties. Forgiveness might be one factor to prevent cognitive decline. A longitudinal study of over 1,000 US adults showed that greater hostility was associated with greater cognitive impairment over 10 years. They followed them over time. And as hostility got worse, cognitive impairment got worse. And greater forgiveness of oneself appeared to mitigate that hostility effect on cognition. So, because survivors of trauma are at great risk for cognitive difficulty, forgiveness might be one way to mitigate this cognitive decline, to prevent that from happening. We know that cognitive decline is going to be a huge problem in decades going forward, as it's been projected by the World Health Organization. So we have to do everything we can to try to prevent cognitive decline in populations at risk, such as victims. And if forgiveness could be a critical way to do that, that's really important. So trauma affects the brain. Everything that we experience in life build towards our growing brain. And we're either holding on to those things or we're getting help and talking them through and trying to deal with them. And if we continue to harbor anger and bitterness and resentment, we're really hurting our brain. We can choose what thoughts we have. We can choose, we can't always choose when we have traumatic thoughts that keep coming back, but we can choose to not allow them in. And we can choose to focus on better things. We can choose to think of that perpetrator as a victim, or think about what good can come out of this, or how you're going to help someone else who's going through a similar situation based on what you learned about it. We're either filling our head up with a lot of negative thoughts, or we're working to have positive thoughts through prayer, meditation, and forgiveness. And there's a lot of studies about forgiveness in the brain. These are just two, but there's a lot more. We are just limited with time today, and you can read my publications that'll be coming out that will talk more about them. So what does the Bible say? It says, be angry, but do not sin. So God knows we'll be angry, but we're not supposed to sin. But if you keep reading further, it says, get rid of all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, evil speaking, all malice, and be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. So the whole big thing here is, what are all the worst things you've ever done in life? Do you want them to be forgiven? And if you believe Christ has forgiven you, if Christ died for your sins, God forgives you, then are you going to forgive others the way that you want to be forgiven? So Peter asked, so Lord, how often should I forgive my brother? 7 times? And you remember Jesus said, no, forgive 70 times 7. And the Bible says, leave room for God's wrath. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Now, who would do a better job at dealing with a perpetrator? Me or God? We have to get to the point where we say, he's going to do a better job at it. And if I don't understand it in this lifetime, he's going to do a better job at dealing with this than me. The Lord is not willing for any to perish, but all to come to repentance. So what's the best outcome? That you kill the perpetrator and go to jail for it? Or that you forgive them and draw them to faith and they have repentance and they turn their lives around and they do good? The best example I can think of is Corrie ten Boom. Read her book, The Hiding Place, if you're not familiar with her story. But she was put in a concentration camp by the Nazis and her whole family was killed. The perpetrator, she had to forgive them later, and she had a big ministry that everybody recognized about forgiveness. So Proverbs says, whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who's quick-tempered displays folly. So we need to be patient with others, not to be quick-tempered about things that are offensive. It's commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example. We're supposed to follow his example, and that we should be following. And he committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. He did not retaliate when he suffered. He made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges rightly. So we're supposed to be imitators of God, walk in love. There are many verses about long suffering or patience. The fruit of the Spirit is what we're supposed to have: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control when we want to retaliate. Do not let your hearts be troubled. He wants us to have joy, peace, believing, abounding in hope by the Holy Spirit. So I had the Holy Spirit underlined and bold there because a lot of these things are difficult when some people have had absolutely horrendous things happen to them. And it just feels impossible to forgive, or it feels impossible for us to understand how they might forgive. So we really need to rely on God to help with that. It's bigger than us. And he will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him. So if we focused on him rather than the offense, we lose, this offense starts losing its power over us because we're more focused on God. And in the long run, even if we never figure it out in this life, in Revelations, he will wipe away every tear. So you might not have thought about the ANA Code of Ethics, but it talks about self-care. We are supposed to take care of ourselves the way we take care of others. And we're supposed to continue on with our personal and professional growth. And part of that, a lot of times we feel selfish talking about love yourself. We have to be careful about the way we frame that. But what this means is not lack of regard for yourself, not unforgiveness of yourself. It means having a healthy view of self, and so that we're able to help our patients. Self-care for ourselves so we have more to give to others. If our cup is half empty, we're trying to fill it up. But if we see our cup as half full, we have more to give to others. And that's an important part of what we do. And forgiveness is one critical way to do that, by learning to forgive ourselves and others. One thing that I didn't talk about was the intergenerational problems, because it can affect the epigenetics, where the DNA is not changed, but there's markers on the DNA, methylation that can happen when traumatic events occur. And if we don't deal with it, this can be passed on to the next generation, and the people can be remembering all these things from childhood. But it's important to work on forgiveness to try to prevent these epigenetic changes. So I have a book coming out, and the neurobiology of forgiveness is going to be a chapter. If you want to read more about that, it's supposed to be coming out in 2022. It's called Adverse Childhood Experiences, Understanding the Neuroscience of Trauma and Healing Throughout the Lifespan by Springer Nature. So there's more to read on the way. These are my references. These are some of my publications of others that I used here. Normally, if we were all in a room together, I would ask for questions or other thoughts. If you'd like to contact me, you can find me through the University of Delaware School of Nursing, and you can find my webpage with my research, and you can email me. My email is there. So I hope you were able to gather some thoughts here about forgiveness, and it could be helpful for you and those in your practice. Thank you for your attention.